Good day, everybody. Dave Walker here again with the B2SMB Institute, and I am very excited to bring to our audience Connie Evans, who's the President CEO of AEO. Connie, welcome.
Thank you, David.
It's great having you here. Why don't you explain a little bit about your background and the Association of Enterprise Opportunity, what you folks do?
Sure. And again, thank you for having me. This is a great membership that you have and a great organization. So again, it's an honor to be here. I think I'll start off by really saying I am the product of a self-employed mother who, as a widow of four, obviously I'm the youngest, I watched my mother run a catering business from our home in Franklin, Tennessee. That business put four children through college. My mother purchased our own home, sent me to private school. I saw early on what business ownership can do to build wealth and generate the income to take care of families. Having started my career as a master level psychologist, I always worked in low-income communities of color. I realized, though, that most of the people coming to me for therapy were sent through some kind of system, the legal system, the foster care system, some kind of system where they had been unable to cope in some way with whatever the stresses were that were going on in their life. And as they get referred to me, it became very obvious that if these folks had money, they would go a long way in being able to help themselves. And I'm not to say that there's never a need for clinical intervention, but what people really needed that were coming to me was money. And so I began then to make the transition from clinical services to really thinking and focusing my work on how do we help low income people build wealth and assets through business ownership. So that takes me then to, I started one of the first microfinance, micro business programs in the country in Chicago, working mostly with African-American women, many of whom, were single parents, not all, but many single parents who just needed the tools and resources to be able to start a business that could take care of their families. During the time I was there, I started and led the organization for its first 14 years, and we created over 8,000 new startups, new businesses, all by Black and some brown women. And then later, AEO, the Association for Enterprise Opportunity, was started. I was on the original board back in 1991. Now I have come full circle, not having served on the original board and now leading the organization. AEO is in its 30th year, if you can believe it. It seems really strange to say that. But we are, even at 30, incredibly relevant and a leader in innovation and for micro business and microfinance in the US. We have, as a trade association, we have over 1,700 member organizations across the country who provide capital and business support services to what we consider underserved businesses and entrepreneurs. We call them underserved because it's not really about being low income, but because of their low starting wealth, they are underserved by the marketplace. They don't have the collateral and the assets to pledge for, bank loans. Even the banks and other products really don't meet their specific and often smaller needs. And so they are being underserved by the marketplace. And so that's who AEO is in a nutshell. We do our work in three basic buckets, if you will. We, have established ourselves through research that provides really actionable insight on serving micro businesses. We advocate on behalf of policies that support the industry. We use that research to help inform even our policy and advocacy work. And then we develop new products and platforms that create market efficiencies and connect market actors to our vast network, really trying to bring disruptive innovation, if you will, to helping address the many challenges and needs of micro businesses.
Wow. Okay, so I have about 1,000 questions to unpack.
Oh,
So I
that's scary.
apologize if
It makes me feel I wasn't clear, but okay.
No. You were incredibly clear, but everything I think is of genuine interest within our audience, and
Right.
our audience of executives from large enterprises serving small business, all are trying to understand better these opportunity zones is probably the best way to describe it, that really have either been misunderstood, not understood fully, and so I really want you to take us to school on a bunch of different angles of what you spoke about. So let's talk about first micro business.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to diminish their impact on the economy, whether it's at a local level, at a regional level, even at a national level, because they're so small. There as Melinda Emerson, our mutual friend, says, there's just gajillions of them who don't even make $100,000 a year. But collectively, are these micro businesses very important to their communities, to their regions, to the national economy?
Very much so, David. So pre-pandemic, and unfortunately these days you have to talk in that language, kind of right, pre and in, the current existing pandemic. But pre-pandemic, there were 2,584,000 Black-owned businesses in this country. Going back to micro businesses represent over 90% of all businesses in this country. Mm-hmm. Call a micro business a business with fewer than 5 employees. Mm-hmm. Again, let me repeat. Over 90% of all businesses, I didn't say 90% of all small businesses, over 90% of all businesses in this country are micro. That's huge and quite significant. Micro businesses contribute almost 31% of all the jobs in this country. Now, when I say 31%, that's taking in probably about 26% of employment directly. And then that other percentage, 5% or so, is coming from the spin from that production, as well as the indirect jobs that are created through consultants and other kinds of contractual work. That's huge. If you were to put micro businesses and their contribution to job creation, we would be somewhere, micro business, if it was considered an industry, for example, would be somewhere in the top 3 that are generating the most jobs across the country. So in the aggregate, it's really quite significant in terms of what micro businesses themselves do. Now, I first answered your question in talking about, what percentage that Black businesses are actually producing that. And it's real easy to kind of talk about Black businesses when you are talking about micro businesses, because about 97% of Black-owned businesses are micro. Mm-hmm. 4% of Black-owned businesses are employer firms.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority, as you can see, are sole proprietors. And so if we think about just, that as micro business as an industry,
Mm-hmm.
we are talking about the smallest of the businesses, but the largest constituency, if you will, of this ownership.
So you've done research, and I'd love to know that, what the origins of Tapestry, your research Tapestry was. But tell us about what Tapestry does to really, frankly, paint a more vivid picture of those 2.5 million Black-owned businesses in the U.S.
Yeah, our Tapestry work has been pretty groundbreaking. Few years ago, we set out to have a better understanding of Black business ownership in the country. And I'll have to be honest with you, David, and your audience. A lot of it was I wanted to change the conversation. Much of the conversation, particularly at that time, around Black-owned business is what I call the Black woe is me story, right? Black businesses were kind of outside of conversation. And when there was a conversation or attention or awareness brought to them, it was all in such a negative context and connotation. 2.5 million, that's significant, right? And so, but it didn't resonate much with most actors, most market actors. And we clearly know it didn't register on what I call Main Street, thinking about like the traditional financial institutions and things like that. So I wanted to do research that would allow us and get us the information so that we can begin to change the conversation. And so we launched probably a year-long research study that was, again, pretty groundbreaking in terms of the results. I'll just mention two particular results out of that work and what we've kind of done to address some of the things that we found. So one significant finding was the wealth creation, or the opportunity to really create wealth and began to help close the racial wealth gap. So research shows, even our own research and research by others, Brookings and others, have shown that the wealth gap is just continuously growing. So when we compare the average family wealth of Blacks to the average family wealth of whites households, there is a 13-point percentage gap. Whites hold 13 times more wealth than Black households.
Mm-hmm.
Compared Black households with a business owner to white households with a business owner, and looking at, again, the average, that percentage gap goes from 13 percentage points down to 3. From 13 down to 3. So the excitement that with more successful business ownership, we can begin to significantly close and narrow that wealth gap. So that was a big finding that was super, super important. And again,
which is the antithesis of the woe is me story, right? I mean, it's the antithesis of that. It's basically saying, hey, land of dreams. This is the American dream. If we can foster more African-American entrepreneurship, we're going to lift the whole relationship of Black disparity.
Exactly. I mean,
amazing,
simple, right?
Number.
Yeah, it's really is. Then the second finding that we have is we realize that there are 3 major barriers to Black-owned businesses reaching their full potential. It is the starting wealth gap, as I just mentioned, that starting wealth gap. It is a credit gap, that is just credit or capital gap, which is just hugely significant. even your members, I bet you understand that, right?
Mhm.
Blacks cannot go and get capital the way that their white business counterparts can, for lots of reasons. It's bias, it's all kinds of reasons behind it, but it's a fact, right? And it's a pretty significant one. And then the third barrier, excuse me, the third barrier is a trust gap. And we get the wealth gap. There's a lot of research on it. AEO has done research on it. We definitely understand everything I think there is to know about the capital gap, because again, so much research has been on it, including ours. But this trust gap was really kind of significant and new to us. But what we found is that each of those are significant barriers on their own, but the interplay of those three gaps, the trust, the credit, the wealth gap, those three, when they are interlinked, act like kryptonite in keeping Black businesses from really reaching their full potential. Now, it doesn't keep Black businesses from starting. Black people start more businesses than any other segment. They just die quicker. And so what we've done with Tapestry, because of those two findings, we really wanted to help fund and find the solutions between this again, that trifecta that's working as the real kryptonite in keeping Black businesses from moving forward. So we launched the Tapestry project. And the Tapestry project comes out of that study, where we have provided funding to 5 what we call cohorts in 5 cities around the country: Atlanta, Chicago, Detroit, Minneapolis, and North Carolina. I just forgot the place in North Carolina, and then New York City as well. Mm-hmm. We are just wrapping up our evaluation of their work. Again, each of these cities had a group of organizations who came together. And the organizations were mixed. Some included policymakers, some did not. But they brought a partnership, a mini ecosystem together to address how those 3 interlocked barriers played out in their community. Just to give you a quick example to make that come to life a little bit better. In Chicago, for example, we, AEO, worked with a cohort that focused on about 26 or so Black-owned restaurants in 2 South Side neighborhoods. And they worked together to, again, try to address the trust gap, the credit gap, those things. So that's one example. In Atlanta, they were focused on addressing how those barriers play out in a situation that was being gentrified, and moving Black business owners who had been there for a very long time being pushed out of the community, or there was a super total 100% change in who's in that community due to gentrification, and how it was going to impact their ability to continue to be a surviving business. So again, we just wrapped up the work in looking and working with those 6 cities and how they were able to help. I think each worked with like specific 50 Black-owned businesses in their community to address these issues. I think the findings will be really quite informative and insightful for your members. So as soon as that report is published, I'll make sure you get a copy.
And I will invite you back to talk about it on our podcast, because I'd love to dig in on it. I was really struck by your observation borne out in the data that it's the trifecta of trust and access to capital. And the third one was, forgive me, the third one was the starting wealth gap. Yeah. Is if you had to try to pick the lock of those three things in combination and say, where do where do you think intuitively is the best starting point for that? And how do you, and do you think the research will in some ways reveal that, that what you've most recently done in these 5 cities will reveal that?
Wow, that's a great tough question.
Yeah.
Where would you start? What's in, so many people, and I bet even your members would say, well, start at the capital gap, right? Because if you have money, you can maneuver through some of this stuff. I'm not sure that's true, because other research that AEO has done shows that when we evaluated business owners, it wasn't necessarily focused on Black, but business owners who received capital only compared to business owners who received capital and business support services, those business owners who received both had revenue growth 30 percentage points higher than those who only received capital. So that might suggest, okay, capital is not the main thing. This trust issue, David, is huge.
Mm-hmm.
We are in the midst of a 2-year study to take a deep dive on the trust gap. Let me share a little about how that trust gap manifests. And we might want to say, well, that might be the starting point. I think it's a very difficult but great question to ask. The trust gap, it's been fueled by years of discrimination and bias currently, and how it tends to manifest is Black founders, right? Founders of businesses don't share or use a title that allows them to identify themselves as founders, because they assume, they do not trust that white customers would come to them if they knew they were the founder or the owner of the company. And so they often have, a white employee, a white partner who plays the role as key to the company. Just think what that must do to your mental state if you
makes me sick.
having to walk around with that kind of, I can't let anybody know, even though I'm the one building this business.
That's just that's tragic. I mean, I actually witnessed that. I grew up in deep rural Virginia, and in lovely Goochland County with a population of 10,000. And I saw that actually. There was a general practitioner, wonderful doctor, African American doctor, who would basically be in the background for his white partner.
Yeah.
He did a lot of, he certainly served the African American patients who came in, but when it came to the white patients, even though it was his area of specialty, he kind of was he was kind of have a subspecialty in pediatrics. The white physician would go in and basically make the advice on the kid, on the white kid, but he'd actually leave the room to ask his partner, his African American partner, hey, what do you think the right answer is here? And I just, that to me is so distressing and disturbing. And it also, by the way, fits with, and I appreciate you tackling this pick the lock conversation, because I do think it's very difficult. But in general, small businesses don't trust big brands, big institutions. We just finished some research in December and January with our partners at Accenture that says that broadly 50% of small businesses trust the big brands that serve them, the big institutions. So it's bad to beginning. Every person who I know who understands the African American small business community says, yeah, it's a lot worse in the small business community of African Americans. And your story of not wanting to reveal their founders fits with also this reluctance to really build kind of business credit, because again it requires more disclosure of financial state and condition, and that it's an uncomfortable process to be so revealing on what is felt to be kind of private information. And that generates kind of a, because of the wealth gap, generates this dependence on credit cards, personal cash flow, those kinds of things to build the business, that never shows up at Dun and Bradstreet, right?
Right.
Never shows up in a business credit report. And I applaud you, and I think our audience wants to be your partner in figuring out where does this start, and how do we, in a good process, really fix this? Because I think you
Yeah.
would say that if you made a career of advancing the success of African American owned businesses and entrepreneurs, there's a huge payback. I mean, it's an enormous potential customer base if you want to be really ruthlessly capitalistic. It's incredibly powerful in what it could be.
It certainly is a huge opportunity, right? It's, one other, and I love that story you just shared in terms of, your hometown and being able to witness it. When we first launched the Tapestry work, I at our conference, we hold an annual conference every year, and at our conference that year, I was speaking to the audience about, this new area of work, and I took them through a little quiz before saying much of anything else. And I put out those, we put quotes on the screen for them to look at that were taken literally out of the newspapers. And it was quoting one man here in Chicago talking about that experience. Like you just said, they gave a story similar to what you just shared.
Mm-hmm.
The audience to tell me was that current, or was that, like in the 1950s or before that.
Mm-hmm.
And most people said it was way past that. That wasn't current. So people, I mean, folks who, even our audience are our members, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other partners, they didn't even get that trust gap is real, very real today. And we think it's super significant in keeping Black-owned businesses from growing. I'm sure a lot of your members have recognized that one of the opportunities for their own growth has been in partnerships, whether a joint, some kind of joint venture, or some other form of partnerships. But those partnerships are how most white businesses are able to grow. And that lack of trust cuts that opportunity really off. If we can bridge this trust issue, then we can create more opportunities. What we know also from the research is that Blacks are more likely to hire Blacks. And so we're able to address both problems, the wealth, being able to help grow wealth in Black communities, families, but also to be able to create jobs in Black communities. So we are, like I said, we are in the second year, just starting the second year of a 2-year deep dive study on this trust issue. We have, some psychologists working with us. We have a whole wonderful, wonderful team engaged with our research director and team. And again, I'll come back when that story is ready to be shared and told. But the opportunities to really create what I consider, and the AEO believes is so important, which is a robust and inclusive marketplace, right? A robust and inclusive entrepreneurship that helps to grow the economy for everybody. And that's what we're choking ourselves off of, right? When we don't recognize these barriers and try to solve them, we're just choking off opportunity that could be ours, could be everybody.
So then, great segue. Tell me about Main Street Rise.
Main Street Rise. Well, like I said, COVID hit, right? People moving, working their business, and COVID hits. And when the pandemic hit, AEO recognized very quickly that we were very well positioned to stand up a relief program for micro businesses. And so we went to our partners, some of whom are probably your members, maybe. Mm-hmm. So we went to partners like GoDaddy and FanBank and others to create a suite of products that were all digital-based products that we end up quickly and provide free access to these services through Main Street Rise. Bench provided, free accounting services that, along with PPP coming out, most of these businesses didn't have records in order. And so being able to access, bookkeeping through Bench was great. FanBank offered kind of like the e-based gift cards, if you will, where people generate cash very quickly. And most of these businesses just do not have a digital presence. And so we have been working with GoDaddy for a year or more already, and it was easy to help them. They helped us stand up opportunities for people to access free services to create a digital presence and then continue to learn digital marketing. So Main Street Rise provided, probably with all of our partners, and I'm sorry I didn't mention all of them, but through our partnership, we probably provided over $10,000 of free services to business owners who came directly to the site and were able to sign up and get those services. It provided a great relief and assistance to thousands of people who have now used Main Street. Then people came to Main Street, some of our other partners, and said, we would like to start a grants program. We want to give grants to Black-owned businesses. And that's when we created the kind of, it's not a real separation, but it is a real separation in that nonprofit, we go where our partners want to go, right? In helping to address services. And so all of the services I mentioned in Main Street, and there are others, were available to any small micro business. But when partners came and said, but we really want to focus grants on Black-owned businesses because they have been, disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And so we set up quickly a grants management program. Our first partner was PayPal, and they continue to be a great partner. But in our grants program, we are able to work with our corporate partner from eligibility criteria all the way through the vetting and decisioning, selecting what business owners, the application process, the vetting, the review, the disbursement of funds. And so to date, David, we have been responsible for dispersing about $300 million in grants to Black-owned businesses during this COVID. And we're still engaged now with GoDaddy has been part of that. PayPal, as I said, is one of the largest of our partners to engage in supporting Black-owned businesses with grants. And then there are others, like we are working now with Fiserv and have been working with Fiserv to distribute between 8 and 12 million or so dollars to Black-owned businesses. And so what started off as a relief program through Main Street Rise has grown to include grants, and now even a new platform that Main Street Rise will soon merge into something called Resili. And we've built Resili with the partnership of Deloitte, Guidehouse, Qualtrics, I think I just got their name wrong.
Qualtrics, no, there is a company called Qualtrics, yeah.
Yeah, so I said it correctly. Facebook, MasterCard, all of these partners have come together to help AEO build out a new, just amazing personalized platform where people get customized and personalized resources and benefits. Something really unique. Black businesses, tell us what they need, what they are facing, and we use those insights to inform all of the solutions we create. And so, we've made sure that the program Resili solutions have been culturally centered design, if you will, to really meet those needs. Our friend, I think you and I share a good friend, Mitch Jacobs, has taught me lots. But one of the things he taught me is about the current trend and the results of what happens when you use that trend of customization, personalization. AEO has built Resili to kind of have that personalization built into the products and services that we're offering. So it's a great, it has been, Main Street Rise has been a really great platform that allowed us to really grow and meet the needs of Black-owned businesses during this COVID period and COVID-19 infused recession, if you will.
And I'm not knocking grants in any way, shape, or form. I think grants are wonderful, and I applaud you for, my God, $300 million in grants. That's actually huge and should frankly capture more headlines. But what you're building now with Resili, I think that not only is there an impulse, at least from the business to small business leaders that I talk to offer grants and to financially assist minority-owned small business, but also to provide help, genuine help, and to do so in the form of technology, in the form of education, in the form of upskilling, that popular new phrase of just getting kind of the entrepreneurial chops and business operating chops up for all entrepreneurs, but specifically for this community. So I was interviewing the leadership of Yelp for this conference, and I want to get your reaction to a data point that came out of their what they call their health and safety report. It's a big annual report that they do that kind of tracks basically all the different component parts of reviews within Yelp. I think you probably remember a couple of years ago, they started adding in, very subtly, not making a big deal out of it, but identifying a business as a woman-owned business or a minority-owned business or specifically a Black-owned business. In the last year, the increase in search on their site by consumers for African American owned business or Black owned business was up 3,000%. Do you think that consumers are, frankly, are waking up to the fact that it is important to vote with their wallet on the support of African American owned business? And do you think if so, is that just a flash in the pan, or do you think that's really, frankly, something that sustains?
Interesting data point, as you said, and it's it's an interesting one because it does represent a change, a significant change. There were previous studies done, or at least stories done by journalists, right, that showed how people responded on Yelp differently if it was a Black-owned business. And it could be the same business, or the same products being sold, but if it was Black-owned, people would skip over it and go to a white-owned business. And so that is significant, I want to say. I think we see across the country, we're actually beginning to do some work in the UK for one of our corporate partners. And we're finding that the influence of George Floyd's murder has again awakened people in ways that had not been conscious before, right? Not visible before. So I think that's what we're seeing, or what Yelp is finding with that 3,000 percentage points, higher, that
Mhm.
searching, looking for Black-owned businesses. I think the disparity is, it's interesting. I hope you don't have to edit this out. But on MSNBC, during the trial for Mr. Floyd's murder, there was journalists outside, interviewing people who were around the courthouse.
Mhm.
And they stopped this one white man and asked, "Why are you here?" And the man said, he was here because he wanted to, see justice done. He wanted to understand that. But what the important part of his message was, he it had taken all of this around Mr. Floyd's murder to understand the privilege that he had as a white man.
Right.
He had not known that, was not aware of that prior, and wanted to do something about it. And the reporter asked him, so what are you going to do? He goes like, "I don't know. I Googled it." And he said, "You Googled what?" He said, "I Googled what can a white man do to help
I think I remember the story. Yeah.
right, help black 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 the black what's it called, Black Lives Matter. What can a white man?" He literally Googled that. And so now they're running commercials, right, with that saying on MSNBC. So I say that to say, yes, I think it's a good data point. I think that's what we're seeing probably by many of your members who've been moved to do things in a bigger way than they may have normally been supporting or paying attention to the Black business community. Will it last? I wish I had the answer to that.
Yeah, I think we all do, right?
I'm hoping that this new awareness and better understanding continues to bear fruit. So, because as I said, I think inclusive economy means understanding what each segment of the entrepreneurial economy, of the business economy, of the business owner segment is, understanding their needs, their challenges, their opportunities, and then meeting those needs and challenges. It's not one size fits all, and then everybody, that's an inclusive entrepreneur. That's not how an inclusive economy comes about. And so
Right.
I think if we are able to get our community, our society supporting an inclusive marketplace, and we're able to get your company members to bring in more inclusive products and suppliers, et cetera, I think it creates more and more opportunity for everyone. And I think all of us would love to see that happen.
My last question to you is, I hope it's not, I hope it's as clear as I mean it to be. You've personally mentored so many young African American women to become entrepreneurs. What do you say to them today as you talk to them about launching their business? What are the main things, the main points you want to make to them?
When I am having the chance to talk to these women, it may sound really strange where I start off, but I think it's probably where everybody starts off in talking to a would-be, if you will, entrepreneur, business owner, an aspiring business owner.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, start with your research. One of the concerns that we have in looking at Black and Brown owned businesses, they tend to be in industries that are lower revenue producing industries.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for a variety of reasons. Again, that lack of wealth, so they don't necessarily may not have had the money to fund their education or the credentials for, starting in a higher revenue producing area like technology or so. They couldn't get access to the capital to start. And so there are fewer barriers in entry, right, to some of these lower producing industry segments. But do your research. You know, are you oversaturating in a community with another whatever business, hairdresser, or whatever the business might be? Or, you know, someone had mentioned there were like how many muffin shops in a community. We don't need one more muffin shop, maybe, or something.
Right, right.
So that research has such big consequences, not only for, you know, what product and service, but where you're going to locate, where is the community who has the resources to pay for the product and service. So all the aspects of market research and really understanding where you can not only bring value, but where there is value to be had in the particular business that you're about to lead. That's where I would suggest you start. Start with the research, understand the support, build your own, you know, like kitchen cabinet, so that your cabinet are filled with the kind of advisors and supports that you will need. Act like a big company, even when it's just you. But do that by having the right kind of board or advisors and things. And then you can build from there. You can do wherever you want. If you have those two things, you know what you know about your research in that market, and you have the right people surrounding you for advisors and support, then the rest you can figure out, right? You can take classes, you can do this, you can do that. But those are, to me, are the essential two places that you should start, and then grow and fill out from there. You know, you mentioned, David, that this, hopefully some of this is news to your partners, but and some, I know some of your partners, and they work with us. They are, I mean, some of your members, and they are partners with us. I guess I would also just, you know, make a pitch, if you will, for your partners, even more getting engaged with us, in particular, and you know, other organizations as well. But you know, AEO now, we believe, has the largest database on Black-owned businesses. And so we have over 60,000 data sets on Black businesses. And so the kind of insights and learnings that we can bring to bear with your members in helping them understand better how to work with, plan for, produce products and services that really meet those needs, because we know their needs. We have built up a very solid, trusting relationship within the Black business community, and want to use those insights with others who can help us create solutions that meet their challenges as well as their opportunities, right? There are opportunities for increased synergy between market actors, your members, the Black-owned businesses we work with, all 60,000 or some subset of that 60,000, and AEO, being able to bring different market actors together to really create disruptive solutions that move these businesses forward, creating new products, new services, but making sure they are designed for Black businesses to feel comfortable and trusted in using those services, and building their businesses around the utilization of products and services from companies that care about what they do, care about how they're moving their own businesses forward. So I really invite your members to partner with AEO around creating these new solutions that move Black businesses forward.
That is an invitation and a pitch I will happily take forward. You know, we very consciously placed you at the very top of our agenda because your message is so important. So right between Evan Goldberg, the founder of NetSuite, and Kushri Vastava from Verizon, because we really wanted to make sure that you really were able to deliver what is a very powerful, very articulate message to our membership audience. It's so appreciated Thank you so much, Connie.
Thank you, Dave. It's been my pleasure.